Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Athletics Weekly podcast. My name is Euan Crumley, and in every show we bring you everything you need to know from the world of run, jump and throw, analysing the biggest stories and speaking to key names from the sport. As with last month, this episode also features two guest interviews as we hear from double world indoor record breaker Grant Fisher about his amazing start to the year, plus 9-time Olympic champion Carl Lewis gives us his views on the trials of World Athletics' new long jump proposals. We're recording this just before the European Indoor Championships are about to take place in Apeldoorn, plus the World Indoor Championships in Nanjing follow hot on their heels towards the end of March. If the last few weeks are anything to go by, they should be worth watching given the performances on the track and in the field. If there has been a theme to 2025 so far, it's record breaking. Barely a week has gone by without one world record or another falling, and whether it's Jared Naguse and then Jakob Ingebrigtsen in the mile, Grant Fisher over 3,000 metres and then 5,000 metres, Jacob Kiplimo in the half marathon, or Mondo Duplantis in the pole vault, everywhere you look, records are falling. So to discuss this and more, I'm joined by AW's Head of Digital, Jason Henderson. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Euan.
Jason, you've covered athletics for a long time. Have you ever known a start to the year quite like this one?
No, probably not. I thought for the past 2 or 3 years, there seems to be a lot more world records lately. I mean, that's just my general feeling. It seemed that when I joined the magazine, I think about 27, 28 years ago now, you were quite lucky to get world records. They were quite rare. You know, you might get a sprinkling of them throughout the year, you know, maybe 2 or 3, 4 or 5 here and there. But now they just seem to be happening most weekends. It's quite amazing. So, yeah, I think there are a lot more. There are a lot more than there used to be.
There's an obvious question that a lot of people are asking about all of this, and it's why.
Yeah.
And there's a number of contributing factors, I guess. A lot of people point to the shoes. You know, there's there's rising standards all over the place. What are your own thoughts about what's happening just now?
I think it's a mixture of things, really. I mean, obviously the shoes are a big factor. I don't think it's the main thing, but they are a huge factor. I think that the shoes have also kind of helped raise the standards generally across all the events. So it's now become, you know, fairly normal. Say for instance, for elite male athletes to run 13 minutes for 5K. You know, you go back 20, 30 years and it was an amazing performance, whereas now it's becoming a lot more commonplace. So we've just seen this gradual raising of standards, which obviously the shoes have helped bring in. And then there are other factors as well, like training techniques have got a lot better. You know, gone are the days when a world-class athlete would fit in an hour or so's training in the morning and then in the evening, you know, built round a full-time job. I mean, that just doesn't happen anymore or is very rare. You know, athletes are full-time. They spend most of the year at training camps, and endurance athletes are living at altitude for longer periods. And then we have lots of other arguably smaller factors as well, like the use of bicarb, as it's known, bicarbonate of soda, which is helping a lot of the middle and people think even long distance runners. I'm quite a big believer in the fact that the nutrition in half marathons and marathons in particular has been a massive thing. I mean, you've only got to go back 20 years and Haile Gebrselassie was running a marathon taking just water and nothing else, didn't have any kind of energy drink. And he was not surprisingly bonking out in the latter stages. Whereas now the nutrition is just, you know, the science behind it has moved on to levels that we've never seen before. A lot of people think that athletes are holding it together in the latter stages of a marathon due to the shoes. That's probably true to an extent, but I think it's also the nutrition.
As you mentioned it there, and it's an increasing talking point as well. And athletes have been very open about the number of athletes have been very open about how they use it. You mentioned bicarb there, a very humble baking ingredient that's probably at the back of many people's cupboards in their kitchens. Bicarbonate of soda. Can you sort of highlight what role it plays or what sort of function it has? Because it's the athletes using it is nothing new, but it has a difficult sort of digestion. It can cause digestive difficulties, but there are new ways of taking it which have helped that process. So why would they be taking it in the first place?
Yeah, very very much so. You've kind of hit the nail on the head to a degree. I mean, I'm 55 years old now, but I remember experimenting with it when I was about 15. I think I read it somewhere in a little magazine. Long before the internet came along, I just saw a snippet about it somewhere, and I just took very basic bicarbonate of soda with water, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours before an 800-meter race. The side effects are that you probably spend a bit longer on the toilet than you would have done otherwise. It plays mild havoc with your stomach. I wasn't too bad. I think it affects people to different degrees. It wasn't too bad with me, but the benefits are that it's supposed to kind of buffer the acid that builds up when you're running fast and hard. So it's alkali, so it nullifies the acid that builds up in the muscles, which is typically seen in this kind of period where you might tie up towards the end of a 400 or 800-meter race, or any kind of hard sprint finish towards the end of an effort. I think over the subsequent 40 years or so, there have been a lot more studies on it. A lot studies that have shown that it has a big positive effect, and there are some companies out there who have managed to package it in a way that athletes, it basically becomes a lot more tolerable to their stomach. They take it in the form of a gel or a soup. Athletes like Keely Hodgkinson have had it. I think Grant Fisher, who has set world records already this year, he's admitted that he's started taking it now, and it doesn't upset the stomach like it used to. And whereas people used to think that it really helped mainly 800-meter runners, maybe 400-meter runners, there have been studies that have shown that it can help athletes over 3K, 5K, and even half marathon and the marathon. It's become one of the sort of quiet factors that is maybe leading to lots of these improved performances that we've seen.
Yeah, and I think you're right that it's not necessarily one factor that's contributing to the whole thing. There's not one necessarily obvious reason for it all. There are a few factors at play here, but I guess there are a few voices within the sport, or from fans who will look at races and look at these times that are just coming down and down and down and down, and finding it harder to appreciate almost when a performance is really good. It's becoming harder to sort of work to have a frame of reference within the sport, I guess. Yeah. Is there a record that stood out for you the most out of the ones that have happened so far, the performances?
I think for me in the past year, maybe Ingebrigtsen's 3K record outdoors last summer, I thought was really, really special. I mean, I don't know, people always want more, don't they? So we're really expecting, I think, this year for Ingebrigtsen or whoever, any of his rivals to get close to these very long-standing Hicham El Guerrouj records over 1,500 in the mile. They're within reach now. I see there's been a bit of talk as well about a woman running a sub 4-minute mile, maybe Faith Kipyegon. I noticed another article just before we started recording this podcast. I think that's all a little bit pie in the sky at the moment. They've got a few seconds to take off. We'll probably see it one day, but it'll be maybe a few years yet. But yeah, certainly El Guerrouj's 1,500 and mile records. I mean, they're really within the sights of El Guerrouj and co.
Yeah. Well,
company as opposed to Sebco.
Well, let's hear from one of those recent record breakers, Grant Fisher, last month. 2 records, 3,000 meters indoors, 7:22.91, and then a few days later, the 5,000 meters, 12:44.09, both in America, and 2 very, very different races. One was a tight battle with Cole Hawker, and the other virtually a solo time trial. So I caught up with him and began by asking him which of the two performances he enjoyed the most.
I mean, I guess it's Wednesday when I'm speaking to you right now. I raced on Friday. So, I mean, even 5 days later, still not feeling quite right. I think old rule of thumb I've heard is like 1 day per kilometer of racing that you had hard. So raced
Okay.
5. So I'm on day 5. So hopefully tomorrow I'll feel normal again.
And what's the sort of the mental feeling now? Is that what you've done managed? Is it started to sink in yet? Have you had a chance to reflect on these past few days?
Yeah, I've reflected a bit. I don't think I've fully digested everything that just happened just because, world record just sounds really strange in my head still. And some of those times, like, I wouldn't have expected a year ago, 2 years ago for sure. And, to have those attached to my name now is pretty cool. And, the sport is about running fast and winning. And, I just ran really fast, and I had a great battle with Cole Hawker in the first race, and the second race was more of a time trial setup. That was incredible. I'm still kind of on the high from the race.
Do you have which one did you prefer being part of? I guess are they just both so different that it's hard to sort of compare the two?
I'd say the 3K with Cole was probably more exciting and special, just because I didn't really expect to run that fast. I expected a really good battle with Cole, but I didn't think that it would drag us that fast and that far under 7:30. So there was a lot of shock there. And all I was focused on was racing Cole. And I think he was focused on the exact same thing, just racing. And the time completely took care of itself. Obviously, we had really good rabbits. They took us out fast, and we had a fast track and a really good environment. And the Millrose meet itself is a lot more professional and polished than the 5K I just ran. The 5K at Boston University, it's a little more of a free for all, a little more chaotic, a little more. It's more of just like a college meet almost. Whereas Millrose is very professional, built for TV, and the atmosphere was really really good, but different. Millrose is a professional environment. Boston University, like everyone was on the infield, inches away from my face as I was running, so a different kind of electric environment. Um, the the 5K record, like you said, was a time trial, so I knew what my goal was, and it was to break the world record. And when you set your mind like that, um, it's a little binary. Either you break it or you don't. So a little risky, and I was happy it all worked out. But the feeling was different just because I was watching the clock in the 5K, and I was concerned about the splits. In the 3K, I was not watching the clock or concerned about the splits. I just was trying to beat Cole.
Yeah, yeah, and well, that I was going to ask how the psychology changes because obviously in your 5K, I think the second half your laps were within fractions of a second every time. Um, how do you maintain that when it is just you against the clock? How are you managing to keep that going? Was who was helping you from the side, for example, as well?
Yeah, it's way more challenging to do it alone, in my opinion, at least. In the 3K, it's nice to have something to chase. Um, and even if you're in the lead, and I felt Cole right on my heels, that is kind of a constant reminder to push. Whereas in the 5K, Jimmy Gressier was with me for a while, but then I got some separation, and I felt nothing on my heels, and there's just empty track in front of me. So everything in your brain is telling you to slow down, like conserve, and make sure you make it to the finish line. But because the goal was so high, I knew if I relaxed for 10 seconds, that could be really consequential in the end. So yeah, it was really challenging because almost like every 50 meters, every 100 meters, I had to remind myself to push a little harder. And
Yeah,
I had my coach there. My coach was at the 100-meter mark, so kind of the beginning of the curve on the backstretch, and he was going to read me splits. But very quickly, I realized I couldn't hear anything. The crowd was so loud, and I mean, everyone was so close to lane one on the inside that even though my coach was right there, when I ran by him, I was probably a foot from him. It was really, really challenging to hear the splits. So um, I was more looking at the clock. They had a big clock every time you came around each lap. So each time I came around, I was like, okay, I think that was a 30. I think that was a 31. Um, I wasn't positive. You're trying to do some math, but you're not thinking very straight at that point in the race. So uh, my splits probably looked very consistent, but each lap I was giving more and more effort just to maintain. And even the last lap, I didn't have much of a kick. I in a time trial situation like that, you kind of want to cross the line and have absolutely nothing left, but not run out of gas too early, and also not feel like you had more in the tank after you finish. And I think I played it pretty perfect, but it's a painful way to do it.
So thanks to Grant for his time, and you can read more from the interview with him in the March issue of AW Magazine, which is out now. Jason, you saw Grant Fisher in action at the Olympics last year, with both his bronze medals in the 5 and the 10,000. What have you made of his rise and his progress?
Yeah, tremendously exciting. I mean, he's literally starting to be touted as a potential world champion at one of these distances. This would have been unheard of until quite recently for an athlete from the Western world, an American athlete to win global titles like this. Actually born and bred in America. He looks like he's got the ability to do it. I mean, he outkicked Cole Hocker, the Olympic 1500 meter champion, already this year. So he's got the speed. I think he's run pretty well at 1500 meters as well. Very, very recently, and he looks like he's got all the tools in his arsenal to actually capture a global gold potentially. We need to see how his form holds out in the next few months, but it looks like he's got the ability to do this.
Now it's time for our second guest. The theme of the March issue of AW Magazine is the changing landscape of athletics. We cover all manner of areas where the sport is changing, and one event where world athletics are looking to make the biggest changes is in the long jump. The somewhat controversial proposals suggest replacing the traditional takeoff board with a much bigger takeoff zone. Athletes and coaches are not happy with it. It was trialled for the first time in competition in Germany recently. German jumper Malaika Mihambo did seem to make positive noises about it, but on the other hand, some athletes even boycotted the event in protest. Yeah. Well, one person who knows a great deal about the long jump is Carl Lewis. He won no fewer than 4 Olympic gold medals in the discipline. And our colleague Tim Adams spoke to him about the proposals to get his thoughts on these changes.
What were your initial thoughts when you first heard that they were trialling this takeoff zone in the long jump?
But I think the bigger issue is when it really comes down to what they're trying to do, and which to me is a little bit more concerning, is that I just think they've decided that jumpers are not going to jump far enough anymore. I'm just being honest. The fouling situation they mentioned that's not true. It hasn't really changed that much. The only thing that's changed are the distances. And so right now the long jump is simply not competitive to what it was 25, 30, 35 years ago. And you saw the performances, they're not going to get better. And there's some things that I want to go more technical, and I want to keep it quick as to why I know that the distances will not be better. Fouling will change a little bit, but not much. Number one, first of all, we're dealing with genetics. And I think what people have to understand is that the long jump is probably the only event maybe in sports we're genetically predisposed to not do. We're not designed to jump far, just to jump high. So all the motions that we do in the air is to counteract forward rotation, as we know. And that's because your body's not designed to jump forward. So another thing too, if you had to jump over a 3-foot puddle or anything, you're just naturally going to walk to the end and jump over. Even if it's a 2-foot and you can clear it, you're not going to think, you're not going to jump from 2 feet back. So the thought is, if we have a big space, then we could tell people, move back to the middle of the board and jump. Well, what's going to happen? They're going to reach anyway, because that's just a natural tendency to do. So they're going to reach. So now the distances are going to go down. As we saw last week, I guess it was in Germany. 1 week, she jumped 707. She comes back and jumps 687 or so. So that's because, that's because what's going to happen is that in order to not foul, people are going to move back into the middle of the board, but they're still going to reach to get to the end of the board because that's what people do. Secondly, it's going to take more time to measure. Do we really totally understand that every single event venue is going to measure it exactly from this spot to that spot? How can we be consistent? 99% of the facilities in the world will never be able to do it. So it just really doesn't make any sense.
I guess World Athletics' argument, and they mention this in their report/press release today, is that in Budapest, I think that they mentioned that so many of the jumps were fouls, and for the people in the crowd, that whatever analysis that they did, that actually they said that fans wanted more kind of concrete jumps.
Yeah, but the reality is that if you look at consistency over major events over the last 50 years, fouling hasn't changed much. So that's kind of a false argument to start with. Secondly, the thing is that I know we're talking to athletes, and here's the bottom line. World Athletics can do whatever they want. Athletes really have no say. There are no events in the world to do outside of the Diamond League and the Continental League. There just really isn't. And so if they want to change a rule, they change it. If the athletes don't want to do it, well, then they, like some say, I'm not going to do the event. Well, look, in everyone's shoe contract, I don't know if the public knows this, Diamond League is in everyone's shoe contract. So if you don't go to the Diamond League, you could get a reduction. So here again, it doesn't matter what the athletes think because you have to go. How many events are long jump in anyway? So if you skip all of those, your contract gets reduced. There's no money in track as it is. You see, so this isn't really about that. I think it's really about trying to erase Mike Powell's world record and trying to erase the indoor world record and just act like it didn't exist so that we can have events where people could see records. That's what I really think it's based on.
Thank you to Carol for his time as well. And Jason, as mentioned at the top of the episode, we've got the European Indoors will be happening just as this podcast is released, and then we have the World Indoor Championships later this month. We're heading towards the London Marathon, the Boston Marathon. We've just had the Tokyo Marathon as well. I'm expecting there's going to might have a few more records to be reporting on in the coming weeks.
Yes, quite likely more records. Yeah, but I guess more importantly, championships. People battling for medals, and two major indoor championships back to back. It's going to be very entertaining.
Well, thanks to Jason for joining me, and thanks to you for listening. We'll be back next month for more from the Athletics Weekly podcast. In the meantime, the March issue of AW is out now, available via athleticsweekly.com and selected retailers. You can also keep right up to date with the latest athletics news and events by heading to athleticsweekly.com and following the AW social media channels. Please also like and subscribe to the Athletics Weekly podcast on your usual podcast platform. See you next time.